Imagine a world in which no nation has an enemy, where every state is courted, every border respected, and every disagreement resolved by goodwill. The idea feels almost moral. It promises a politics of mutual respect, trade, and enlightened diplomacy. It is a seductive vision because it mirrors the simplest human preference. We prefer harmony to conflict. And because leaders can make it sound like a marker of maturity. A foreign policy that seeks friendship with all is painted as principled and modern. Reformers and idealists invoke this language for good reasons. Governments emerging from authoritarian violence or civil war use it to signal a break with a vengeful past. They promise to trade old rivalries for economic openness and predictable relations. Development-oriented states, too, advertise universal friendship as a way to attract investment and reduce the risks of entanglement. If everyone is a partner, commerce flourishes and war becomes unthinkable. Small states have their own practical logic for this aspiration. With limited military power and narrow diplomatic levers, a small country benefits from courting as many partners as possible. Minimizing enemies can mean maximizing markets, avoiding costly security commitments, and keeping the state out of great power contests. On paper, this can look like rational statecraft. If you cannot beat others, be indispensable to them. But these hopes rest on three fragile assumptions. First, they assume other states will respect neutrality and non-alignment even when vital interests are at stake. Second, they assume intentions matter more than capabilities, that rhetorical goodwill will outweigh the hard facts of power. Third, they assume influence can expand without creating friction, that trading, investing, and cooperating never produce jealousies or strategic anxieties. Those assumptions collapse when we see how international politics actually works. Friendship is not simply a moral choice. It is a function of structure, perception, and interest. The promise of being friend to all ignores the basic mechanics of power and the limits of trust. What looks like graceful diplomacy to some looks like vulnerability to others, and what looks like harmless cooperation to one government looks like strategic dependence to another. That deeper reality, why goodwill alone cannot erase rivalry, is what we will explain next. There is a simple structural fact at the heart of international life. There is no world government. No single authority exists to guarantee the safety of every state, adjudicate disputes, or enforce promises. In an environment without a supranational referee, even the most peaceful regimes must prepare for worst-case scenarios, and that necessity breeds a baseline of permanent mistrust. Preparedness designed to deter violence to an outside observer appears to be preparation for aggression. The absence of a guarantor turns prudence into suspicion. Power is not distributed evenly across the globe, and unequal capabilities create predictable anxieties. Rising powers generate fear among established states. Declining powers worry about encirclement and loss of influence. This dynamic, long noticed by historians and theorists and sometimes called the Thucydides trap, means shifts in material capability almost always produce political frictions. Even well-intentioned growth is read through the lens of competition. When one actor expands, others respond, and those responses create new sources of tension. Intentions matter to diplomats, but capabilities matter more to strategists. Words of reassurance can be changed or forgotten. Battleships, missile arsenals, industrial capacity, and technological diffusion are durable. States, therefore, tend to react to what others can do rather than to what they say they want. Because capabilities are observable and persistent, they form the stable basis of security calculations. And because intentions can shift rapidly, trust based on rhetoric alone is fragile and rarely universal. Every state seeks autonomy, the ability to make choices without being coerced or outmaneuvered by others. That desire for autonomy drives efforts to secure influence, alliances, and strategic depth. But influence is a limited resource. One state's expansion of autonomy, whether through military presence, economic leverage, or technological dominance, frequently constrains another's room for maneuver. The structural imperative of autonomy therefore generates friction between otherwise peaceful actors. The system forces each entity to carve out space, and those carved spaces inevitably overlap and conflict. Even in a world of trade and interdependence, certain spheres remain essentially zero-sum. Security remains zero-sum because a dominant military posture for one actor can threaten others. Control of energy routes is zero-sum because access and denial have immediate strategic consequences. Critical technologies like advanced semiconductors or encryption give decisive advantages that are not easily shared. Strategic geography, choke points, island chains, buffer zones confers unique leverage, and rare resources concentrate bargaining power. Cooperation can reduce the intensity of rivalry in some domains, but it cannot transform every strategic sector into a domain of mutual gains. These observations map onto a long intellectual consensus across international theory. Classical realists insist that states pursue interests and status. Moral universalism is therefore inconsistent with political life when interests collide. Structural realists show that, given anarchy and uncertainty, even peaceful states must retain the capacity for rivalry as a rational precaution. Offensive realists go further and argue that great powers are structurally incentivized to seek dominance or strategic buffers, making rivals a byproduct of survival. Liberal institutionalists offer the corrective. Institutions, trade, and norms can mitigate conflict and create zones of cooperation, yet even they acknowledge limits. Institutions lower transaction costs and reduce some incentives to fight, but they do not eliminate the underlying distribution of power or the security dilemmas that arise from it. Put plainly, universal friendship is not merely improbable. Under the basic mechanics of international politics, it is structurally prohibited. The system's lack of centralized enforcement, the uneven distribution of capabilities, the primacy of durable material power over shifting rhetoric, the conflicting demands of autonomy, and the persistence of zero-sum domains together make an enemy-free international order incompatible with the conditions states face. Understanding that structural truth is the prerequisite for any sober strategy, peace is therefore less an absence of rivals than the skillful management of them. Great powers do not simply stumble into enemies. Rivalry is often a functional instrument of statecraft. External pressure, strategic competition, and the need for coherent national narratives turn rivalry from an accident into a governing asset. Rivalry creates strategic clarity. An identified external challenge focuses political debate, prioritizes resources, and short-circuits fractious domestic disputes. Faced with an outside competitor, elites and publics converge on coherent policies, security budgets, industrial priorities, diplomatic lines that would be harder to sustain in a directionless peacetime politics. In short, a rival supplies a public reference point that disciplines domestic fragmentation and compels collective action. From a structural perspective, great powers are pushed to accumulate influence as a form of insurance against encirclement and coercion. Expanding economic reach, military basing, or technological leadership reduces vulnerability, but expansion inevitably threatens others and creates countervailing coalitions. Rivals therefore emerge not as moral failings, but as structural byproducts of a logic that prizes survivability through relative advantage. Power growth rarely goes unanswered. When a state gains capacity, neighbors and distant powers respond by balancing, building capabilities, forming alignments, or hedging strategically. Historical patterns show that even ostensibly benign advances provoke counter-responses. The political effect is systemic. Consolidation of opposing camps and the crystallization of durable rivalries that reshape regional and global orders. Rivals make alliances meaningful. The presence of a credible adversary sustains commitment, reduces free riding, and justifies costly cooperation among partners. Conversely, when an external threat fades, alliance cohesion frays. Members slacken contributions, dispute burden sharing, or defect to other alignments. Rivalry thus functions as the glue that keeps collective security mechanisms operational. Beyond material calculations, rivals supply an organizing narrative, an us versus them identity that helps define a great power's strategic self. This narrative simplifies complex policy choices, produces cohesive foreign policy doctrines, and creates the symbolic language necessary for mobilizing resources and public consent. Major powers therefore institutionalize opposing blocs because they supply the narrative scaffolding that sustains long-term strategy. Rivals are not merely accidental adversaries. For great powers, they are structural instruments, sources of clarity, discipline, identity, and strategic insulation. Preserving power often requires manufacturing or sustaining competition. The responsible task of statesmanship is therefore not the eradication of rivals, but the prudent management of rivalry, so that it disciplines politics without degenerating into catastrophe.